Welcome everyone. In an era of shifting global alliances and rising multipolarity, India and France stand as two pillars of a robust strategic partnership. From defense cooperation to Indo-Pacific security, space technology, and nuclear collaboration, this relationship is evolving beyond traditional diplomacy. But what does this mean for India's global aspirations? How does France's role in Indo-Pacific complement India's strategic vision? And most importantly, can this partnership counterbalance emerging geopolitical threats? Welcome to another riveting episode of Global Focus, where we dive deep into critical global affairs shaping India's future. I am your host, Hari Prakash Sinha, and today we are honored to have Dr. Adityanjee with us. Dr. Adityanjee is the president of Council for Strategic Affairs. He is a renowned geopolitical expert. He will decode India and France's strategic axis today. Dr. Adityanjee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me on Global Focus platform. It's always a pleasure to come on your platform and discuss thought-provoking issues.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So coming to my first question to you, how has India-France defense partnership evolved and what does it mean for India's self-reliance in defense?
India and France have a long history, which most people do not realize, and it goes back to 1950s. So at this point in time, with Prime Minister's visit, 3-day visit to France, ostensibly to co-chair the AI summit with President Macron, on the sidelines, some agreements were signed, and there's a 31-point bilateral statement actually of the visit that was issued by Ministry of External Affairs. Agreements were signed to actually purchase 3 more Scorpene submarines for Indian Navy with possible inclusion of air independent propulsion technology, which DRDO has developed. So that is one aspect, and I think that contract is worth 36,000 crore rupees. Also, India is going to purchase more Rafale aircrafts for the Navy. This will be the Navy variant, I think 26 or 27. And there'll be some potential future collaboration on India's 3rd aircraft carrier, which is still in the planning stage. There have been some hiccups, funding hiccups, as well as technology hiccups, the size, because you don't want to be just sort of remain restricted to 45,000 ton displacement. You want to have bigger aircrafts, and you want to have better technology incorporated. So there is a possibility of collaboration with France in that particular aspect, 3 cutting-edge defense technology aspects. But if we dive deeply into the past, India has France as a defense collaborator and a source for defense armament from 1950s onwards.
See.
So most of the people don't realize that Indian Air Force acquired Mystère fighter aircrafts from France in 1956, and a total of 110 Mystère aircrafts were delivered, manufactured by Dassault, French company. And there were only 3 air forces in the world that used those. One was French Air Force, second was Indian Air Force, and third was actually Israeli Air Force. And India used these aircrafts, actually fighter aircrafts, in the Indo-Pak War of 1965. And friends use these aircrafts in their NATO operations. So there's a long history. Similarly, in years 1959, 1960, 1961, India acquired from France anti sort of anti-submarine carrier-borne aircrafts called Alice. A total of actually 17 of these aircrafts were acquired for India's INS Vikrant aircraft carrier. And that was also used actually operationally. So we are talking about 1950s when France was willing to give or sell, not give, but sell to India. At that time, top of the line aircrafts when West had hesitation. Actually, United States had hesitation at that point in time, and it's even prior to, burgeoning India-Soviet defense collaboration. So France was independently minded, and they wanted to have their independent military-industrial complex, and they helped us actually in 1950s. The Mystère aircrafts were used by India also in liberation of Goa, also in support of Indian peacekeeping operations in Sri Lanka. So we have had a long-standing collaboration with them. French company Safran is providing Shakti engines for India's ALH, Advanced Light Helicopters, like Dhruva.
Yeah.
So there has been total transfer of technology from Safran, unlike from United States, that it's delaying the delivery of GE 404 and GE 414 engines for Tejas Mark II variant. Safran has already started to provide transfer of technology and assembly of the Shakti engines in India, and they are being used in ALH, Advanced Dhruva helicopters. So they are more willing to not only sell you, but also transfer technology. And that leads to an independent collaboration, which is away from the quote unquote rivalry between Russian manufactured versus US manufactured, and there are problems from both sides. So this is a third, more reliable source for defense armament. In fact, the two countries that have less inhibition in transferring technologies are France and Israel. So the recent visit from February 10 to 12 consolidated India-France defense collaboration. And hopefully, this collaboration will help India's stalled IAC-3, you know, advanced career third,
Aircraft carrier.
planning and building. So I think that is a very, very good indicator of future of the defense collaboration. While doing all this, we need to not forget that ultimate aim is to have Atmanirbhar Bharat. You can have as much transfer of technology, but make sure that India's military industrial complex thrives and we are not permanently dependent on any country whatsoever
Yes.
for the transfer of technology, and it should not be a buyer-seller relationship. One good thing is that France is likely to import from India the rocket launchers.
Oh, that's
Uh,
good.
so it's kind of getting balance, and I
Mhm.
think that's the way it should be.
So can India and France together counterbalance China's influence in the Indo-Pacific?
Look, India and France are good strategic partners. We have had strategic partnership for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And it's important that we have independent partnerships separate from the Western alliance. And I'm making this as a very, considered statement. You don't want to put all your eggs into one basket. You don't want one country to dictate your Indo-Pacific policy. Whether it is to balance China or for power projection, you don't want to be a vassal state of one superpower. And in that process, France has an independent stance. We are moving from unipolarity to incipient or nascent multipolarity. And in this era, France wants to be an independent pole. It is an independent middle power. Yes, it works in collaboration with the West, but it wants to maintain its independent existence. So in that sense, India-France collaboration in Indo-Pacific is important, keeping in mind that France is an Indian Ocean power. France considers its naval base in Djibouti as the gateway to Indo-Pacific. Now, Djibouti has Chinese base as well as US base. So if we collaborate with France, if we work together with France, maybe we can have, some facility at the French naval base in Djibouti instead of creating our own base. So that is one advantage. France also has a naval base in the French island of Reunion in Indian Ocean region. And then on the eastern side, France has the West Caledonia island and military base. So France has these overseas French territories that are used as naval bases, and any cooperation with France in Indian Ocean would be a welcome thing. You can actually deal with France more as a co-equal rather than as a vassal state.
Yeah.
France will not dictate to you what is going to be your foreign policy, what is going to be your trade policy, what should be your tariff level. So I am suggesting that in this era of emerging multipolarity, India as a rising middle level power, as a regional power, has everything to gain with strategic partnership with France, which wants to maintain its own independent existence
Yeah.
geostrategically, geopolitically. Mind you, France was one of those countries who in 1956 actually quit the military command structure of NATO. They still remain part of NATO, but they resigned from their military command structure in order to maintain their independent status. But they rejoined the NATO military command structure back in 2009. France had also not joined nuclear proliferation treaty. Although it was signed in 1968, France joined it only in 1992. And what most people have forgotten that France provided from 1982 to 1992 highly enriched uranium for Tarapur atomic power plant to India when US had put sanctions on India and had stopped providing the nuclear fuel, causing delays, shutdown, and slowing down in Tarapur atomic power plant. So for solid 10 years, they provided us nuclear fuel, and they ended that practice only when they joined the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty because it was incumbent upon them as signatory to NPT to stop providing nuclear fuel to any country that was outside NPT. I'm bringing out these incidents to buttress my argument that France has an independent stance on international affairs, international issues, and that suits India. France has never, condemned India over Kashmir or for that matter, for India's nuclear tests, both the times. And I think it's good that we are developing this collaboration in Indo-Pacific region, independent of what we have with United States for either Indian power projection or to balance adversarial powers without naming them, you know who they are. So that is definitely good for India.
And what about the nuclear energy cooperation? How significant is this between India and France in ensuring in India's energy security?
I already talked about Tarapur atomic power plant,
Yeah.
and France is one of those European countries where 68% of the power generation is from nuclear power. Although there were some hiccups and anti-nuclear postures by civil society in France about after the Fukushima nuclear power disaster in Japan,
Yeah.
but predominantly major part of their power supply electricity comes from nuclear power, and there's a very strong French company called Areva that is on the forefront of nuclear power technology. In 2010, India and France signed the memorandum of understanding for France to supply a large nuclear power plant, European pressurized reactor model at Jaitapur in Western Maharashtra. However, it has not fructified basically because of a couple of reasons. Initially, there was pressure from the local residents in India, which is the standard toolkit gang technology, to not allow India to develop the nuclear power sector. That locals, instigated by outsiders, started to agitate that we will not give the land, so they refused it. When the land acquisition was done, and NPCIL, the Indian partner, nuclear power, company of Indian government, NPCIL, Nuclear Power Cooperation Limited, came to give the checks for land acquisition. The villagers refused to accept the checks. There were allegations that Jaitapur lies in seismic zone, so the nuclear power plant would not be safe like Fukushima. So that was one aspect. Second aspect was India's civil nuclear liability law that put the onus for any disaster or accident not just on the nuclear power plant operator, but also on the supplier. Now, Western countries are very loath to accept this responsibility. They will supply you nuclear power plants, but if anything happens, they want you to take the responsibility. And I think it's not logically acceptable. That's why that parliamentary law was passed in India, keeping in mind the disaster in Bhopal in 1984, the MIC, methyl isocyanate carbide plant, Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, for which US washed its hand.
Yeah.
So Indian situation is once bitten, twice shy. However, because of resistance from the Western countries to provide advanced nuclear technology, there is some rethinking in India about, changing it to no fault insurance in which the state will take the responsibility. And they are talking about, modifying the law so that Jaitapur nuclear power plant can go through, which is fine. That is one model. The other can be a shared model. Why can't you have the shared you create at the time of purchase of the power plant a shared pool of insurance fund from both the supplier country and the operating country or operating company.
Yeah.
So there are different ways of doing that. Having said that, India and France are also going to possibly collaborate on India's design, small and modular reactors. uh, DRDO and BARC has sort of uh, research these small SMR, small and modular reactors, and there's a plan to build at least 5 of them. So France wants to be a collaborator in that project. I think we need to be talking about joint production in third countries. That is where it needs to go so that India becomes part of international nuclear commerce. And that is important because at some point in time, you want to sell Indian design SMRs or other nuclear reactors to other countries. India has around 23 nuclear power plants at this point in time. 7 are in process of being set up and one is being decommissioned. India is probably fifth or sixth largest in terms of number of nuclear power plants. So you have some indigenous expertise, and there's no reason why you should not use Indian expertise for global export, of course, under safeguards to responsible countries that will adhere to IAEA protocol or something like that, just like we have in recent 10 years focused on India's defense exports. Defense armament manufactured in India now is being exported to more than 100 countries.
Yeah.
Same way, India needs to become a global player in nuclear power plant commerce and not leave it to just either Russian Federation or
Yeah.
the Western countries or Japan. You should, be able to get a slice of that pie of global nuclear commerce.
Right.
And I think that is where collaboration with France will come handy.
So, coming to my last question to you, with the US strengthening its alliances, is the India-France relationship a hedge against over-dependence on Washington?
Of course, that is true. You know, I have talked about, independent French geopolitical efforts and France's aspirations to play a role in geopolitical issues independent of US. So France was one Western country, only one country that did not join George W. Bush coalition of willing to attack Iraq for the second time. And the reason France gave was that this was a war not sanctioned by United Nations because Security Council will not pass it. So French did not join. Although French joined as part of NATO's forces in Afghanistan, but in second war in Iraq, France did not join. And you know that India did not join in either of those ventures, although India was asked at that time by United States. There was pressure on Mr. Vajpayee to join US forces.
Yeah.
So you are seeing similarity between Indian stance and French stance. French consistent support to India on nuclear issues, nuclear testing issue, French-India collaboration in defense sector. So India, because of his aspirations for strategic independence, not even strategic autonomy, should have bilateral relations with middle powers. Independent of any Western alliance, independent of NATO, independent of whatever the alphabet soup United States has created. And in that process, not only you are able to balance your adversaries regionally, but also you are able to bolster your independent stance internationally if you have good trade relations, good economic relations, good mercantile relations, good defense relations with the middle powers. So you don't want a situation that a, a corrupt Canadian government bolstered by a corrupt United States administration is trying to threaten India. So you have to have your business supply chains, your manufacturing chains, your defense industry insulated or vaccinated against any future sanctions. Ultimately, that can only happen when you are able to manufacture everything domestically.
Yeah.
Short of that, you develop independent relationships with other middle powers like France. I'll give you an example. India is a member of Quad. India has focus on Indo-Pacific. France is interested in having an Indo-Pacific presence. We talked about French Indo-Pacific bases from Djibouti, Reunion Island, Western Caledonia. But US does not like France to be, actively involved in those kind of things. So there is a scope for India and France to have their, defense collaboration, their maritime exercises, their defense exercises for other branches of the armed forces. There was a collaboration agreement between Australia and France for France to supply some diesel submarines to Australia. And US forced Australia to cancel that and announce sale of possibly 8 nuclear-powered submarine to Australia under the arrangement called AUKUS. Okay, India is not part of AUKUS. Now, if you look at the AUKUS violates principles of NPT, that a non-nuclear country, which is Australia, is being supplied by nuclear weapons, a nuclear-powered submarine by an NPT signatory, NPT P5 member, which is United States. So there was a lot of angst and anger in France when Australia cancelled the submarine deal with France and signed a submarine deal under AUKUS arrangements over the next 30 years with United States and UK. Is it going to help Australia? Possibly not, because these will be provided by US and UK. They will be the beneficiary, and the purse strings will be opened by Australian taxpayer. I'm bringing this issue that there is a scope for India and France collaborations in Indo-Pacific for independent defense collaboration, independence counterbalancing of other powers, whether that is China or whether that is US. And it will be beneficial for both of them.
So thank you, Dr. Adityanjee. The India-France strategic partnership is more than just a diplomatic handshake. It's a calculated move in the great game of geopolitics. As India aims for a bigger role on the world stage, forging a strong, reliable, and long-term partnership like this one will be key. Will this alliance shape the future of global power dynamics? Only time will tell. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your such deep insights. And to our viewers, if you found this discussion valuable, don't forget to subscribe to Global Focus. Share this episode and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Follow us for more hard-hitting analysis of India's geopolitical trajectory. Until next time, stay informed and stay strategic. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me on Global Focus. My parting message to our audience is twofold. One is that France, despite being a Western country, has not joined the Western bandwagon most of the time, majority of the time, and has refused to join in Western sanctions on India. So that is one redeeming fact as far as France is concerned. And the second redeeming fact is that during World War II, there were 100,000 Indian soldiers that were stationed in France to defend France, and India was under British colonial occupation. 10,000 of those soldiers died on French soil. And France is very grateful for Indians shedding their blood for French freedom. And they are very grateful indeed to us. So we need to capitalize on these sentiments in building the future bilateral strategic independent relationship devoid of pressure from either Russian Federation or from United States or China. It's an independent relationship.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.